Well, shares in Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation are continuing to be hammered as the news of the world phone hacking scandal widens. Yesterday, its share price sank another 4.1% to $14.16.
Mark McDonald is a senior analyst with BBY. He's been following the financial side of the Murdoch story very closely, and he joins us now from Sydney. Mark McDonald, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
A 4% fall in News Corp shares on the Australian market yesterday, a fall of a similar magnitude on Wall Street overnight. This is quite a haircut News Corp investors are suffering at the moment.
It certainly is, and of course there may be further to go yet. It's worth remembering that during the GFC, News Corp shares traded as low as around $10.
Is there any sign of this slide slipping? You're quite pessimistic on that. I think the market, the News Corp share price is down about 20% since the start of this month.
Well, it is, and the fact is that the magnitude of News Corp's problems is not yet fully known, and I think that's going to continue to provide some downside risks for investors.
What say, though, can shareholders in News Corp have at the moment, given that Rupert Murdoch, although he and his family own only have a voting stake of 40% of the company, still largely dominant on the share register?
Yes, they are, and of course, as these events unfold, their own future as executives of the company, of course, is coming under scrutiny and under question. There have been reports, for example, that non-executive independent directors have already spoken to Rupert Murdoch about the discount to the share price associated with himself. And of course, if the wrongdoing is sheeted back to the Murdochs, then there's always the risk that they may be disqualified as company directors and not eligible to continue in their current roles.
In your view, as somebody who watches News Corp very closely, is it time for those independent directors to start asking serious questions of Rupert Murdoch?
Well, I believe they already are.
And
I think that'll happen both internally within News Corp and, of course, in the wider forums, such as the parliamentary inquiry in Britain tonight.
Do you see a realistic possibility once this scandal is passed and whatever comes out, given that it's been so fast-moving over the last couple of days, we're not quite sure where it's going to end, that Rupert Murdoch will eventually lose grip of the company he founded nearly 60 years ago?
Look, it's a possibility. I'm not wanting to put it any more highly than that. Clearly, he's a very tenacious man who has devoted his whole life to building up the assets that make up News Corp, and of course quite clearly has succession plans for his son. So I'm not suggesting that these things will happen easily or lightly.
And in what state do you believe those succession plans for James Murdoch are in at the moment?
Well, I think again his fate is tied to that of his father, and in some respects more directly in the firing line, since he was Rebekah Brooks's boss. And of course more immediately involved in the management of affairs in the United Kingdom, particularly with the News of the World.
There is a special meeting being called by directors of British Sky Broadcasting, B-Sky B, in Britain next week, I believe. James Murdoch is the chairman of that body. Do you believe there is now a real threat of his fellow directors moving on him to step down from that post?
Look, that's a distinct possibility if it's seen to be a way of resolving the crisis. And I stress that because that might in fact then involve some understanding around the way that the potential risks for the company might be in fact contained. But if it doesn't achieve those ends, then of course it might be a case of closing ranks instead.
Do you believe Rupert Murdoch will ever voluntarily give up control of News Corp?
Well, there may be a point where it's in his own best interests to do so, precisely because he is such a substantial shareholder. And there's a point where if there is in fact a widely perceived discount to the share price associated with his continuing hold on the executive chairmanship, then of course that may become something that he sees as easily resolved by stepping aside.
And if that was the case, do you believe it is realistic for a fellow Murdoch, be it James or Lachlan or daughter Elizabeth, to step up and take his place?
Well, again, it depends on the circumstances. But look, there are very many talented people in News Corp, and a great many whose names aren't Murdoch. Case Cherry is effectively the 2IC for the group internationally. David DeVoe is the Chief Financial Officer. You've got major parts of News Corp that are run out of the United States, for example, Jim Giannopoulos and Tom Rothman, who run 20th Century Fox, et cetera, et cetera. It's an organisation with great depth of management and executive talent.
Mark McDonald from BBY, thank you very much for your insights this morning.
Great pleasure.